Will you please give me a hand to welcome Tiffany Cherry?
Thank you so much, Nikki, and thank you to all of you for your interest and coming here. Obviously, your valuable time. Thank you to Dion and to 106 Architects for inviting me to come up and speak, and I also too pay my respect to the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather here today, their elders past, present, and emerging, and to any other Indigenous people who are present with us today. So I'm also not an architect. I'll come to that in a moment. But I think Simon and I are just part of the warm up to the architect. So just to give you a bit of a brief on that. And I think Simon played himself down a little bit. He's got a lot of dad jokes. But just so I don't know if some of you who don't maybe know football too much, he's a 2-time premiership player, 3-time All-Australian, 4-time best and fairest, captain of Western Football Club, part of their team of the century, and in AFL Hall of Fame. So I think he deserves a bit of a round of applause for his previous achievements, as well as obviously just a great presentation. So from my background, all right, so as I said, I'm not an architect. I have a passion for architecture. I remember as a little kid driving around a lot with my mum, and I used to drive past houses, would be going to friends' places. That sort of became routine in my head. And I remember looking at specific houses and imagining how I would do them up. But I didn't go into architecture. I went into physiotherapy because I loved sport, and I had I think I had a foot injury when I was in year 12, and I was doing a lot of sport at school. And I remember going with my $40, which was a lot of money back when I was in year 12, and in 1989. And I used to see all these famous sports people coming in and out of the obviously the consultation rooms, and I was like, wow, you get paid a lot of money to meet all your sports fans. So I decided to go into physiotherapy. And then a few years later, I'd never ever seen a female sports journalist on television, and I remember watching one on TV on Sports World, and I had an epiphany, and I thought that's what I want to do. And so I moved. I gave physiotherapy away after having my own business, and I moved into media and just did a sort of a whole 3 years of having 10 jobs at one stage. 5 were paid, 5 weren't, trying to break in because it was all about um, I couldn't get a job because I didn't play the sport. So as you know, football mostly. What would you know? You didn't play the game. As you heard, Nikki just said, I do a lot with gender equality. That was a part of that, was the driving force. My dream was to go to the Olympics as an athlete. I wasn't good enough. And so one day I made this audacious statement that I was going to host it, not having any concept of what that meant. 17 years later, I achieved that dream and hosted the Winter Olympics, and then I hosted the Commonwealth Games, and then the London Olympics, which was sort of the piece de resistance. And then I quit. I was physically, mentally, emotionally, every kind of concept of being burnt out. And I think I was over 40, and I was like, I don't even have a family. It's the whole concept of that. So I sort of took some time out and then peel back all the layers of what I actually was, which essentially is a storyteller, but I love innovation, problem solving, and then started to really develop a passion for our environment. Of course, sport has been part of me since I was little, having an older brother, and gender equality, as I obviously touched on. So today, during COVID, I launched my own with a business partner, Cherry Pick Productions, creating video content, MC, podcasts, etc. Basically, just doing creating a portal for what I already was doing. But after I'll come to a previous job that I was with, which is at Richmond. So I'll sort of give you a bit of another view of what Simon was talking about as well from another football club. But I then moved into head of marketing and media for an education platform. I never thought I'd move into education, but it's a literacy program based out of Sweden. It's got nothing to do with architecture, but it's pretty amazing. So if anyone's interested in that, come and chat to me later. But in terms of my architectural experience, I design and project, manage my own home renovation. I was saying to a friend of mine here earlier that there's a few little hiccups along the way, and some things I look at and I thought, oh God, I didn't do that well. But essentially, it is part of what I love. And then I also put together my daughter's cubby house, and she painted it the other day, as you can see, with her friend. So that's pretty much it. But in terms of the relevance of why I'm speaking, as I said, I started to develop a real passion for our environment. So I finished up in full-time media in 2012. I then did a number of bits and pieces, but in that period of 2013, 14, I became pregnant with my daughter, and then I had her in 15. And I then decided I thought I had a lot of spare time on my hands as a single mum. So I decided to do an MBA while I was breastfeeding my daughter, just because I thought I had spare time. And I also did the board of directors course, which was amazing. And the MBA was in innovation and leadership, and it was fantastic. And so was the board of directors course. I finished that, and then I was like, well, I want to get on a board. So it's not as easy as obviously just putting your hand up. And I spoke to a guy called Malcolm Speed, who's a very experienced board member. He's a former head of the ICC, International Cricket Councils, on the board of Richmond and numerous other boards. And he said, look, we've got this. What do you know about the environment, or are you interested? And I said, yeah, I love things environmental, but not really much. And he said, well, you'll do. We need someone with media experience. So it was a startup, and it's a Sports Environment Alliance. So it's bringing the sporting sector, whether you're a sports person or a club or an organisation, to be really managing your own playing fields. And so it's a not-for-profit providing environmental leadership and advocacy. I highly recommend. It's very cheap to join. Highly recommend that you look into it. You don't have to be a sports club to be part of it. We've got councils involved. We've got schools, etc. So it really the advocacy is fabulous. There's 3 alliances worldwide. One is at Lords in London, and one is in North America in Atlanta, and the other one is with us here in Melbourne. Little moniker is No Planet, No Play, pretty easy to understand. We've just hit 50 members. Chatham House Rules, one that we're just about to announce, which is the Australian Olympic Council, which is great, ahead of obviously the Tokyo Olympics has just joined up. And they did a study just before COVID, looking at where really environmentally where we could have the most impact. And while Essendon's one of our members, and we've got the AFL, and we've got Australian cricket, and we've got the FFA, and we've got numerous Tennis Australia, numerous big organisations. Really, a lot of the gains are at grassroots, where the biggest, where they can be made. And there's a lot of opportunity here for you guys in terms of there's so many grants, etc., around through councils, through the government, and with women coming through. I'm sure a lot of you know this, but just to reinforce it, there's sporting facilities need to be redesigned, as Simon touched on, to make it not an adjunct for women to be a part of it, but to make them as equal and as valued as their counterparts who have historically been there before them. So there's the redesigning of a lot of these sporting facilities, and Richmond was one of them, as a lot of the football clubs do go through this over about probably a 15, 20-year period, Simon would say, where they sort of do redevelopments. So I was offered a job at Richmond. I went for a job at Essendon, and I was on the committee, and I didn't get it. I told Simon this the other day. So then I was offered a job at Richmond, and then I had to obviously quickly stand off the Essendon committee. I was in Essendon. I follow Essendon. So anyway, I returned in 2017. Well, lo and behold, we win 3 flags. And I was previously their physio back in, just to rub it in, back in 1995, 6, 7. And so I won a flag in 97. So now I've got 4 flags for my name. So that's more than double you, Simon. So there you go. Anyway, and I was asked to come on board and to manage a campaign that probably some of you would have heard, called This Girl Can Victoria. It started in 2017, and it was a 3-year contract that Richmond was awarded as one of the profile clubs or profile organisations. Western Bulldogs as well were, but then they went out to a whole variety of sports. But Richmond was the biggest, just given obviously our membership, which is over 100,000. So it was a $500,000 budget, and I had to cut. Richmond just said to me, "You just manage this for us." Whatever you're doing and however you want to. So we'd put in for a license for the AFLW, and we were awarded that later in 2017. And so this sort of gave me a lot of ideas, which I'll come to in a moment. But I also joined the Diversity Inclusion Action Plan, and as Nikki said, the founder and inaugural chair of Richmond's REACT, which is Richmond's Environment Action Team. So before I move on to the next one, that was an interesting one. So I'm on the board of C. Our chair of C is on the board of Richmond, and Richmond wasn't a member of C. And I kept saying to Malcolm Speed, why are we, is Richmond, why are we not? And he said, I can't get them to do it. And then I went and spoke to my boss, and he said, well, look, we've already got all these pillars. We do the Alana Madeline Foundation, which is fantastic. We do our Indigenous, the Coram Gamaji Institute, which is great. And we had, a few others, and the WWF, which is the World Wildlife Foundation. But it's probably we've got too many. And so the West Coast Eagles were a member, and they were redeveloping Amy Stadium, and they've done an amazing job with their waste management. It is world class and incredible. And so I wrote an email to Brendan Gale, I call him Benny. The reason why was because I was his physio back in 95, 6, 7. So I've written this email, but quite well aware that, there's a connotation of being a bit of a greenie. That's sort of not really now, but back in 2017, it was a bit like women in 2015 and maybe Indigenous in 2005, 6, 7. So it was not really sort of mainstream to be pushing that agenda. And I didn't hear back from him, and I didn't approach him until later that year. We were sitting at a This Girl Can Victoria sort of final assembly, and they had a welcome to country by one of the Wurundjeri Indigenous elders. And Brendan and I actually happened to arrive just slightly late, walked in together, so we sat down together, and I could feel him getting really engaged in this quite extended Wurundjeri sort of a welcome to country. So at the end of the whole presentation, I turned to him and I said, "That was fabulous, wasn't it?" He said, "Yeah, I love it." And I said, "I just want to revert back to an email I sent you." And I thought, here's my opportunity, to an email I sent you with regards to joining the Sports Environment Alliance. And he said, "Oh yeah, I remember receiving that. I didn't know how to respond." And I said, "That's okay. I'm not having a crack at you. I just wanted to relate it to what we've just done." So we're all about, Richmond's about obviously winning premierships and football, but we're all about community. It's well documented. Not we anymore because I'm not part of them, but they beat their chests a lot about what they do in the community, and they do a lot in the Indigenous space. And I said, but really, we help the Indigenous community with the people, but pardon what I'm going to say, but we crap all over the land and the airs and the waterways and everything else which is half of being Indigenous is all about. It's about their totem. We have the eagle in the Wurundjeri community, the Yorta Yorta, and I said, this is just we're talking the talk, we're not walking it. And he looked at me and he said, "I've got absolutely no rebuttal. You're absolutely right. We're signing up." So we signed them up straight away, and off we went. And I started up the Richmond Environmental Action Committee. We are undergoing, Richmond is undergoing renovations and a whole revamp of Punt Road, and they hadn't chosen an architect by then. They may have now, so if any of you are thinking. But I kept pushing, and I don't know what they're doing now, but I kept pushing that they really look at it from an environmental perspective. And the reason being, so we had our head of finance at Richmond, and he was as most heads of finance, if anyone in here is an accountant. Anyway, he counted his pennies very closely. And even the membership, he was like, but obviously Brendan said sign up. And I said, when I had a chat with him, and I said, "Look, we will save money." And he said, "Well, yeah, well, I'm open to having a look at it." So with really not much experience at all, I just then went about and, pardon the pun, cherry picked a whole lot of the low hanging fruit of what we could change. And I started with just changing the mindset of our team of about 120 people, including the players. We all given, one of our partners was, I don't know who the sponsor was, and they all gave us a keep cup. And I noticed that probably 20% of all of the people, we had a barista every day coming along, would use their keep cup, but everyone else would just get a takeaway cup. And so I went to the barista and I said, "How much does it cost for a cup?" And he said, "Oh, 5 cents." I went, "Oh, that blows that concept out of the water." And he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I thought it'd be about 50 cents. I want to give a saving of 50 cents to every person who brings their keep cup." And he said, "I'll do it for you." So cut a long story short, I then presented to the club and encouraged everyone. I pulled out a $100 note and I said, "This is what you're going to save if you use your keep cup." By the end of it, we got, including Damien Hardwick. So he kept dodging me because he kept forgetting his keep cup, until one day he shoved it in my face. He said, "There you go, I've got your keep cup." And I said, "That's brilliant, give me a hug." So we're hugging in front of everyone. I was like, "There you go." And I'm not the girl, by the way. Anyway, we were hugging. And it was in public, and I said, "See, I want everyone to see that you're bringing your keep cup because you're a leader." And he said, "No, I get it." I then signed Richmond up. This is where it went to board level, and I had a few people tap me on the back and go, "This is amazing." And Brendan was like, "That was really easy." And he of course, the CEO, he just went, "Oh, I took all the glory," but I'd done all the hard work in the background. So I signed Richmond up to the United Nations. We became the fourth Australian body organisation to sign up to the UNFCCC, well, the Sports for Climate Action. It is one of the one of the pillars, I suppose, of the United Nations. So Bowls Australia, amazingly, was grey power. So we talk about millennials and Gen Zs that's driving the campaign of and the agenda of environment. But Bowls Australia was the first to sign up. Then, actually, I think it was the Tennis Australia. They did a big hoo-ha and said they were the first, but they weren't. It was Bowls Australia. And then the MCC, and they are amazing. The MCC recycles, I think now they're up to over 80% of all of their waste. They have this big mulcher where they throw so much into it. And I'm talking a huge amount of all their food and a whole lot of other things. And they put half sand, or one thing sand, and two things of soil, and it comes out with as a mulch, and they put it over all of the MCG and all of the MCC parklands, and then they give it to the local schools and communities and elderly homes. It's incredible what they do. So we signed up, and then we did a LinkedIn story. And obviously, this is Richmond. This was in 2018. Richmond had won the premiership in 2017. We had 100,000 members. And the LinkedIn story that we did was the second highest liked, viewed, whatever it was, impressions that we had for that year on year, which was incredible. So that's what obviously our fan base was saying, hey, this is pretty amazing. Obviously, LinkedIn is at a higher level, more educated, people are more in business, but that's what they were liking that. So the Sports for Climate Action commit to 5 principles. So undertake systematic efforts to promote greater environmental responsibility. So from ad hoc to strategic. So a lot of organisations doing ad hoc. Let's just make it now more strategic. Reduce overall climate impacts, which is obviously making it climate neutrality, or to sequester climate is the next step. Educate for climate action, so knowledge sharing. So this is again all part of what C was doing. Promote sustainable and responsible consumption, and advocate for climate action through communication. Obviously, getting Richmond on board and getting all these big clubs is great because that we can use those platforms. And how it comes back to that third place and opportunities for you guys in terms of, again, the redevelopments of not just the big ones, but the grassroots. These people have big platforms through all their members, etc., where they can promote, and there's no reason why they can't apply. It doesn't have to be a big organisation that can be part of the Sports for Climate Action group under the United Nations. There are opportunities for everyone if you can tick, or not just tick, but embody these 5 principles. So the United Nations, back in 2015, the Paris Agreement, which I'll talk to about in a second, but they created 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Who knows the SDGs? Couple? I've only seen a couple of hands. Okay, so I highly recommend that you just look up United Nations SDGs. I got to be careful when I say that. Yeah, anyway, I won't. But so number 3 is good health and well-being. Clean, you can see it here, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy. These all relate to the stuff that you guys can do. Sustainable cities and communities is you. Responsible consumption and production. And number 13 is climate action. So they came out of the Paris Agreement of 2015. Who's heard of the Paris Agreement? Good, that's great. So the goal is to limit global warming. We need to hear more about this below 2 degrees Celsius, preferably 1.5 compared to pre-industrial levels of 1850 to 1900. So then the Sports for Climate Action was developed out of that. The sports impact on our climate through construction, travel, energy, water use, catering, etc., is considerable. And sports global interest for billions of fans and media coverage is a powerful platform to advocate for positive action. So again, you can go to these organisations and say, well, let's look at it from an environmental perspective. Let's get you joined up to the Sports for Climate Action group, or have that as a goal. And then you can make, obviously, a big impact. And why? So why do you want to do this? And why Australia versus the world? Well, Australia's commitment is significantly insufficient, tracking to nearly 3 degrees increase by 2050. Per capita, we're tracking to contribute, so this is per head, obviously, more than 15% of our global emissions by 2030, which is an absolute disgrace. In 2017, we lost more than half the Great Barrier Reef. So if you just think about that, half of it is gone. I think it's something that is like a billion species. So we lost 500 million species because of global warming. So basically the waters, there's more water mass than there is land mass. So when the earth is heated up, obviously the water heats up, conduction. And then when it gets too warm, it's too acidic. And so the organisms or the life dies. A further 2 degrees, so we're tracking at 3 degrees. So a further 2 degrees and most of the Great Barrier Reef will die, gone. Now, just the most recently, we've had the bushfires, catastrophic. They've said they're the worst bushfires New South Wales has ever had, and we've just had a once-in-a-century flood. So catastrophes have happened throughout the ages. Just now, since really 2015, we're seeing that they're happening like on steroids. So they're happening so much more regularly, and they're happening at a level, as you see here, the worst and once-in-a-century flood at high levels. And they're going to keep continuing because as the ice caps melt, what happens is there's a whole lot of gases under there. So so they're being kept in, but once the ice caps melt, those gases are released, and then they expedite the warming because they contribute to global warming. So then it just becomes self-perpetuating, and that's why the temperatures are rising so quickly. So 2015, we said that we would reduce our greenhouse emissions by 28% below those 2005 levels by 2030. Post-COVID, though, the national government's initiating a gas-led recovery. Now, I know there's a lot of other factors involved in this, but we really need to be pushing our environmental component. But there is hope. All the states and territories have adopted a net zero target by 2050. So on a state level, there is a lot of help. So again, bringing it back to what's related to the sporting sector, well, millennials and Gen Zs. Simon, these are the next fans or the current fans. These are the ones that the clubs want to capture because they're the ones that obviously they're going to continue over the next 40, 50 years. A Gallup poll collects data in over 160 countries. They found in 2019 the millennial and Gen Zs are worth $1 trillion in consumer spending, and their concern for global warming is at an all-time high. In fact, it is in Australia the number one concern that they have. Number two is mental health, but they're intrinsically linked. And that comes back to the third space. So social media is the second biggest concern, mental health. Post-COVID, we're suffering from a global epidemic, though, of loneliness. Social media is a surrogate for friendship, and I've stolen that from Kira Ashetron, Stop Being Lonely. Good book. So millennials and Gen Zs, they're demanding CSR programs around environmental sustainability. Millennials want to find meaning where they work and where they shop, but it must be authentic. So obviously buildings, third place, is a brilliant start. So going back to the concepts that we're all talking about, we've spoken about what it is, authentic connection, really wanting to and the need to feel valued. How can we create this place with our environment at the fore is obviously what I want to leave you with. And there, as I said at the beginning, there's great opportunities through grants and funding. So a few takeaways. The generation of now and tomorrow demand we do better. It's not about what we want, it's about really what they want moving forward in the legacy. Being environmentally savvy, as I showed you with Richmond. Oh, sorry, I didn't actually say that. Going back, it was up on my slide. So the head of finance. So I ended up saving Richmond through all the low-hanging fruit that I did, all the changes. I saved them $200,000 in 6 months, so pre-COVID. So that was year-on-year saving. So it's over a 12-month period. But in 6 months, I managed to save the club $200,000, and I didn't have a background in what I was really doing. It was just common sense. And half of that, though, was changing our energy provider, but still, might as well as a quick win. So, highly encourage you to have a look into that. But $100,000 was simply getting rid of coffee cup, getting rid of plastic cups, getting rid of the water fountains, using the humble tap, and getting rid of, looking at our sorry, I've just got a mental blank, looking at our uniforms and doing a stock take. And we used to every year brand new uniforms. It was just crazy what we're doing, getting rid of plastic bags in the membership shop, etc. So there's great opportunities. The third place is the social connection. Highly, though, push that you are authentic for the millennials and the Gen Zs. And that's it. Thank you so much.